Hi everyone, my name is Hannah, and today I'm going to be talking about the 8 classics that I would like to read either this year or next year. I'll be going through these in the order that they were written from newest to oldest, which means that we are going to actually start and end with the most controversial books on this list. So I guess we start with the bane and end with the bane. Before I get started into this list, I would like to say that if any of these books make you uncomfortable, are there ones that you refuse to read, that is completely fine. Everyone is different. You do not have to read a book just because it's a classic. These are just ones that I would like to read because of the history of the authors, the background of the stories, the controversy that surrounds some of them for their topics or genres, and for the discussions that the books themselves bring to the table. On that note, the first book is Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. This is a fiction story that came out in 1955. This is a book that a lot of people personally will not pick up. I actually owned this one and a few others on this list. However, they are in the United States, so I don't have access to them. So if my library happens to have them, then that is where I'll be picking them up. This book is very famously controversial based on its main character, Humbert, who is an older man that is interested in a younger girl, and the story kind of goes through his psyche and his thoughts and feelings that he uses to try and justify that relationship. Next on this list is the book 1984 by George Orwell. This is a sci-fi or dystopia book and was written in 1949. Quite a lot of people are familiar with 1984 since it is, in the United States, required reading for a lot of curriculums. This is actually a book that I was supposed to have read in high school. However, I procrastinated and didn't really read it at all. I probably just looked at the SparkNotes version or something like that. I honestly don't remember anything about this book besides there kind of being like a thought police, I think. But that is pretty much all I know going into it. Overall, the book is basically a nightmarish vision of a totalitarian, bureaucratic world where everything you do is monitored and there really isn't a sense of individuality. So I believe it follows a person who's trying to kind of break through that a bit. This is actually considered a pretty scary and prophetic book since there's a lot of parallels with what happened in the book that are happening nowadays. Next is a book that I only recently learned about. It's called Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correct, but I'm trying. It is a gothic mystery that was written in 1938. I do know that there is recently a Netflix movie, I believe, based on this, but I have not watched it, and I will not watch it until I read the book first. This novel starts in Monte Carlo, where a woman meets a widower who pretty much instantly proposes to her, but when she goes back with him to where he lives, she finds that his previous wife, Rebecca, seems to still be in their lives in more ways than one. And I guess it kind of goes through the mystery surrounding that. This next book I actually first learned about through the Netflix show Penny Dreadful, as he is a character in this series. The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. It is a gothic horror and was written in 1890. The main character in this story is obviously Dorian. He arrives in London where a portrait is painted of him in his youth, and there's a magical element where the picture of him ages while he does not. So he is some sort of immortal, it seems like. This next story is actually a novella, and another one that I found out pretty recently. This predates even Dracula. That novella is called Carmilla by J. Sheridan Le Fanu. It is another gothic horror, and it was written in 1872. Carmilla is an interesting one because it's actually one of the first depictions of the vampire as we know it today. It is also a sapphic story, so it's kind of where we get the concept of vampires being more open about sexuality. Since it's just a novella, I don't really have much of a description. However, it heavily influences what we think of a vampire today. Next is a classic that I actually just learned about through Goodreads when I was looking up some of these stories. It was on on the side as a recommended thing, and the cover intrigued me and I clicked on it, and this indeed sounds like a very interesting read. It is originally German and is called Venus in Furs by Leopold von Sacher-Masoch. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. The best way to describe this is that it leans more toward being an erotica, and it was written in 1870. The main character in this story is obsessed with the concept of being owned by a woman, being dominated by a woman. The author of this book is actually immortalized today in the word masochism. The last part of his last name is literally the first part of that word, and this was the first literary tale describing scenes of that nature. According to Goodreads, this remains a classic literary statement on sexual submission and control. Second to last, we have Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronce. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce her last name. The E at the end has 2 dots above it. This is considered a gothic romance and was written in 1847. This is actually a book that some people might have read in high school. Mine did not. I was in the honors course, and I believe the regular class might have read this, but we did not. It's a book I've heard about all my life though, so I finally want to read it this year. In this story, the main character's father adopts a boy, and so she is raised alongside this boy and her other siblings. She forms a really deep attachment to him. However, her brother seems kind of jealous and hateful toward him. Eventually, the adopted son leaves, but apparently comes back for some sort of revenge. Finally, we end with another extremely controversial book, and this is also one that I own. I have no idea where I got this, but I would have been in high school, and I don't know who would have let me buy this book. However, I haven't read it yet. It is the 120 Days of Sodom by Marquis de Sade. It is a fiction written in 1785. This one actually interests me quite a lot based on the author. He actually wrote this while he was imprisoned in the Bastille, and the original manuscript was lost when the Bastille was stormed during the French Revolution. I have kind of always been fascinated by the French Revolution ever since I was a child, and since I now live in France, I've actually visited iconic places of the French Revolution. Like, I've been to Bastille multiple times. What?
Before we were talking about the other author and his name became masochism.
Yeah.
Well, where do you think sadism comes from?
Ha! Really?
Mm-hmm.
So Marquis de Sade, so sadism. Oh, that's funny! It didn't say that.
No, fairly sure.
Oh my gosh. My husband actually just brought up an interesting point, how Venus in Furs, that author's name, turned into the word we know for masochism today. Well, Marquis de Sade, perhaps his name is where we got sadism. He actually just Googled it for me to double check that, and it is true that is where we get the word for sadism. So I find that kind of interesting that I have both of those on my list, and I don't know what that says about me, but I find that interesting. Even the description of this story is really horrendous, and I already know it's going to be a very difficult and emotional read. Same with Lolita. Basically, this follows 4 wealthy men who imprison 24 young men and basically put them through hell while listening to stories told by prostitutes. This is another one that a lot of people will not read. However, I find the history behind how the book came to exist interesting, so I'm going to end up giving it a try at some point. If any of these stories sound interesting as a reading vlog for you, let me know. I don't really have a method for choosing what I'm going to do for a reading vlog, so if you're interested in seeing any of these books as such, I will definitely take that into consideration. Regardless, I think for whichever one of these books I read this year, I will make a video doing an in-depth review, more about the history behind the author, how the book came to be written, and whatever controversy might surround it as well, to have more of a discussion on these classics. that will be all for me today. Bonne journée and au revoir.